Dr. Zephyr Calthari adjusted her crystalline observation equipment for the 100th time that cycle, her four eyes scanning the data streams flowing across her workspace aboard the research vessel Analytical Pride. The ship hung in the darkness beyond Earth's moon, cloaked by advanced stealth technology that rendered it invisible to the primitive detection systems of the planet below. "Another waste of our time," muttered her research partner, Dr. Vex Thornwall, his scaled hands dancing over holographic controls. "The Galactic Research Council sends us to study the most backward species in this sector. And for what? To catalog their primitive mythology." Zephyr's antennae twitched with mild annoyance. She had been monitoring Earth's electromagnetic emissions for 3 standard rotations now, trying to understand the bizarre seasonal patterns that emerge from the third planet every 365 local days. The humans called it Christmas, and the amount of energy they devoted to this celebration was staggering for such a technologically limited species. "The energy signatures are unlike anything we've cataloged," she replied, her voice carrying the musical tones of her species. "Look at these readings from their northern hemisphere. During this Christmas period, electromagnetic activity increases by 347% in specific regions. That's not normal for a species that hasn't even achieved faster-than-light travel." Vex's reptilian features contorted into what passed for a smirk among his kind. They believe in flying quadrupeds that somehow defy gravity without any visible propulsion system. They worship an obese humanoid who allegedly circumnavigates their entire planet in a single rotation. Their mythology is so primitive it's almost amusing. The research station around them hummed with activity. Dozens of scientists from across the galaxy had been assembled for this unprecedented study of humanity. Most were here reluctantly, assigned to what the Galactic Research Council considered a punishment detail. After all, who wanted to study a species that still used combustion engines and broadcast their primitive entertainment into space for anyone to intercept? "Dr. Calthari," came a voice from across the laboratory. Dr. Quill Nethros, a tall, ethereal being from the Andromeda sector, approached with a data pad in his elongated fingers. "I've been analyzing their Christmas music transmissions. The mathematical patterns are peculiar." Zephyr accepted the pad and studied the wavelength analyses. Her eyes widened as she processed the information. These harmonic frequencies, they're creating resonance patterns in their planet's magnetic field. Impossible Vixscuffed, a species that primitive couldn't possibly manipulate planetary magnetic fields, even accidentally. But Zephyr was already pulling up additional data streams. For weeks, she had been noting anomalies in Earth's magnetosphere during the Christmas period, but she had attributed them to solar activity or natural fluctuations. Now, looking at Quill's analysis of human musical transmissions, she began to see correlations that defied explanation. "Look at this," she said, projecting the data into a 3-dimensional hologram above their workstation. "Every time they broadcast these Christmas carols, there's a corresponding fluctuation in the planet's electromagnetic field. The frequency patterns match almost perfectly." Vex leaned in, his skepticism wavering slightly. That could be coincidence, or equipment malfunction. For 3 consecutive years, Zephyr's voice carried a note of challenge. "I've been monitoring this planet through multiple Christmas cycles. The pattern repeats with mathematical precision." Across the laboratory, other researchers began to take notice of their discussion. Dr. Morphia Stellaris, a gaseous entity contained within a specialized environmental suit, drifted over to examine their findings. The humans have been transmitting stories about this Santa Claus figure for centuries. Morpheus' translated voice whispered through the suit's speakers. "According to their mythology, he visits every household on their planet in a single night, traveling faster than light in a primitive vehicle pulled by flying animals." "Flying reindeer," Vex laughed, the sound like grinding stone. "They actually believe in flying reindeer. And this Santa character supposedly lives at their North Pole, where our scans show nothing but ice and a few research installations." But Zephyr was no longer listening to her colleague's mockery. She had pulled up the electromagnetic readings from Earth's Arctic region. focusing specifically on the coordinates that humans associated with the North Pole. For most of the year, the area showed normal background radiation consistent with an ice-covered wasteland. But during the Christmas period, "Vex, look at this," she said quietly. The readings showed massive energy buildups in the Arctic region, starting approximately 30 days before the humans' Christmas celebration and reaching peak intensity on December 24th by their calendar. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their databases. "Probably geothermal activity," Vex said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Geothermal activity that follows human holiday patterns?" Zephyr's four eyes fixed on her partner. "Vex, I've studied 14 different worlds with geothermal systems. None of them align with local cultural celebrations." Dr. Nethros, who had been quietly reviewing additional data, spoke up. "There's something else. I've been monitoring their global communications networks during previous Christmas periods. Children all over the planet report seeing the same figure, an elderly human male in red clothing, appearing in their dwellings during the night and leaving gifts." "Mass hallucination," Vex replied automatically. "Or cultural programming. Primitive species often develop shared mythological experiences." Except, Nethros continued, "many of these reports come from children too young to have been exposed to the cultural programming. And the descriptions are remarkably consistent across different continents and cultures that had no contact with each other when the stories first emerged." Zephyr felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. "How consistent?" Nethros manipulated the holographic display, showing a compilation of reports from across Earth's history. The figure is always described as elderly, but vigorous, wearing red garments, possessing an extremely jovial demeanor, and demonstrating impossible mobility. Reports span cultures that developed independently on separate continents. "Independent verification," Morphea whispered, "the hallmark of objective reality." The research lab fell silent except for the constant hum of monitoring equipment. Dozens of sophisticated civilizations were represented on this ship, each having achieved interstellar travel through mastery of physics and engineering. Yet here they were, examining evidence that a primitive species might possess capabilities that defied their understanding of physical law. "There has to be a logical explanation," Vex insisted. "Perhaps they've developed technology beyond what our surface scans indicate. Hidden installations, advanced propulsion systems they've concealed from our sensors." Zephyr was already running deep scan analyses of the Arctic region, pushing their equipment to its limits. The results only deepened the mystery. No artificial structures appeared on their scans. No energy sources that could account for the massive electromagnetic buildups they had detected. "Wait," she said suddenly. "I'm picking up something new." The holographic display shifted to show real-time sensor data from Earth. It was December 23rd by human reckoning, and across the planet, electromagnetic activity was building to unprecedented levels. But there was something else, trace energy signatures that their equipment was barely sensitive enough to detect. Those readings, Dr. Stellaris's gaseous form swirled within her containment suit. "I've seen similar patterns before, but only in theoretical models of dimensional manipulation." The revelation hit the research team like a shockwave. Dimensional manipulation was theoretical even for their advanced civilizations. The mathematics existed, but the energy requirements were so enormous that only a few species had ever achieved even limited success, and then only under laboratory conditions. "You're suggesting," Vex said slowly, "that a species that still uses combustion engines has somehow achieved practical dimensional manipulation?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Stellaris replied. "I'm reading the data, and the data indicates energy patterns consistent with large-scale dimensional folding." Zephyr's hands flew over her controls, configuring their sensors for dimensional resonance detection. Most ships didn't carry such equipment since the technology was purely theoretical, but the Analytical Pride was a research vessel equipped with experimental instruments for studying spatial anomalies. "There," she said as new readings appeared on their displays. Dimensional stress patterns emanating from the Arctic region, building in intensity as their Christmas celebration approaches. The implications were staggering. If the humans had achieved dimensional manipulation, it would revolutionize the galactic understanding of physics. Species that had been spacefaring for millennia would suddenly find themselves technologically inferior to a civilization they had dismissed as primitive. But how? Nethros asked. Our cultural analysis indicates they have no scientific understanding of dimensional physics. Their most advanced theories barely acknowledge the existence of additional dimensions. Perhaps, Morpheus suggested, their achievement isn't scientific at all. The laboratory fell silent again as the researchers grappled with what that might mean. Throughout the galaxy, advanced civilizations had developed technology through rigorous scientific method, mathematical analysis, and engineering precision. The idea that dimensional manipulation could be achieved through some other means challenged fundamental assumptions about how the universe operated. We need to increase our monitoring for December 24th, Zephyr said finally. Whatever is happening on this planet, we're going to document it completely. Vex nodded reluctantly. Despite his skepticism, he was too good a scientist to ignore compelling data. I'll prepare the deep space arrays. If this Santa Claus actually exists, we're going to get readings on him. As the research team prepared for what they expected to be the most significant observation of their careers, none of them noticed the small, elderly human who materialized briefly in their ship's observation lounge. He wore a red coat covered in frost, and his eyes twinkled with ancient wisdom as he surveyed their sophisticated monitoring equipment. Ho ho ho, he chuckled quietly, his voice somehow carrying warmth through the cold vacuum of space. They have no idea what they're about to witness. The figure vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving only a faint scent of peppermint and the barely detectable energy signature of dimensional displacement. But the ship's sensors, focused entirely on Earth, missed the brief manifestation completely. Down on Earth, children around the world were settling into bed with unprecedented excitement. Christmas Eve had arrived, and with it came the promise of magic that adults had long forgotten how to believe in. In homes across every continent, cookies were left by fireplaces, milk was poured into glasses, and carrots were set out for reindeer. The children didn't know that their simple faith was generating quantum resonance patterns that defied the understanding of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. They didn't know that their collective belief was creating dimensional pathways that made faster-than-light travel not only possible, but inevitable. They simply believed in magic, and in doing so, made magic real. High above in the analytical pride, Dr. Kalthari watched her instruments register impossible energy readings and wondered if her team was about to witness the greatest scientific discovery in galactic history, or the greatest revelation about the nature of reality itself. In a few hours, they would have their answer. Christmas Eve was about to begin, and, with it, the most extraordinary demonstration of power the galaxy had ever recorded. The aliens who had mocked flying reindeer and dismissed Santa Claus as primitive mythology were about to learn that sometimes the most advanced technologies in the universe wore the disguise of simple, impossible magic. The sensor arrays aboard the analytical Pride hummed with unprecedented activity as December 24th dawned across Earth's eastern hemisphere. Dr. Zephyr Kalthari had not left her workstation in 18 hours, her 4 eyes tracking multiple data streams as energy readings from the planet below reached levels that should have been impossible for a Type 0 civilization. The dimensional stress patterns are intensifying, she reported to her assembled colleagues. Whatever mechanism the humans are using, it's building towards something massive. Dr. Vex Thornwall, despite his earlier skepticism, found himself leaning over her shoulder to examine the readouts. The electromagnetic signatures emanating from Earth's Arctic region were now strong enough to be detected by their standard navigation sensors, no longer requiring the specialized dimensional resonance equipment. This is impossible, he muttered for the dozenth time that day. A species that hasn't even colonized their own moon cannot be generating energy signatures of this magnitude. Across the research laboratory, Teams of scientists from 17 different worlds monitored every aspect of Earth's electromagnetic spectrum. Dr. Quill Nethros had established a direct link to monitor human global communications, while Dr. Morpheus Teleris focused her sensors on atmospheric disturbances that might indicate advanced propulsion systems. "I'm detecting quantum fluctuations in Earth's polar regions," Stellaris announced, her gaseous form swirling with agitation within her containment suit. "The mathematical patterns are consistent with large-scale matter transportation, but the energy source remains unidentifiable." Zephyr pulled up a holographic display of Earth, overlaying it with energy signature data. Pulses of power emanated from the North Pole in regular intervals, each one growing stronger as local time approached evening in various zones across the planet. "Look at this correlation," she said, highlighting specific data points. "Every time these energy pulses increase, we detect corresponding spikes in what the humans call Christmas spirit, increased electromagnetic activity from their brains during expressions of joy, generosity, and familial bonding." Dr. Keth Valerian, a cybernetic intelligence from the Rigel system, processed this information through quantum calculations. "The correlation coefficient is 0.97, he announced in his mechanically precise voice. "In scientific terms, we are observing a direct causal relationship between human emotional states and dimensional manipulation." The implications sent a ripple of unease through the research team. Throughout galactic civilization, dimensional manipulation required enormous technological infrastructure, precise mathematical calculations, and energy sources equivalent to stellar output. The idea that it could be achieved through emotional resonance challenged every fundamental principle of advanced physics. "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Linnea Vorthack, a tentacled being from the Crab Nebula, "we are misinterpreting the data. These readings could indicate natural phenomena unique to this planet's magnetic field." Zephyr shook her head, her antennae drooping with fatigue. "I've run every analysis in our databases. These are not natural phenomena. Someone or something on Earth is manipulating dimensional space with a level of sophistication that exceeds anything in our technological archives." As Earth rotated and evening fell across the Pacific region, the energy signatures intensified dramatically. Children in Australia, New Zealand, and Eastern Asia were going to bed with visions of Santa Claus filling their dreams, and each sleeping child seemed to contribute to the growing power emanating from the Arctic. "I'm reading massive atmospheric disturbances," Morphia reported suddenly. "Something is moving through Earth's upper atmosphere at approximately 0.1 light speed." Every sensor on the ship immediately focused on the coordinates Morphia provided. For a moment, their instruments detected nothing but empty space. Then, as if materializing from another dimension entirely, 9 distinct objects appeared on their scanners. "Magnify and enhance," Zephyr ordered. The holographic display zoomed in on the objects, and the research lab fell silent. Moving through space at impossible velocity were 9 quadrupedal creatures, each approximately 2 meters in length, with elaborate antler structures and what appeared to be primitive harness equipment. Behind them, connected by energy tethers that defied classification, was a vehicle of some kind. "Those are—" Beck's voice trailed off in disbelief. "Flying reindeer," Zephyr finished quietly. "The human's mythology is accurate." Dr. Nethros adjusted his sensors to focus on the vehicle being pulled by the impossible creatures. It appeared to be a primitive sledge, no more than 4 meters in length, constructed from what looked like organic materials. No visible propulsion system, no energy signatures that might explain its ability to travel at relativistic speeds. "I'm detecting a single life form aboard the vehicle," he reported. "Humanoid, approximately 1.8 meters in height, substantial body mass, generating electromagnetic patterns consistent with advanced neural activity." "Santa Claus," Stellaris whispered. "We're actually observing Santa Claus." The entity piloting the impossible sledge was moving from house to house across the Pacific region, and their sensors tracked each stop with increasing amazement. At every dwelling containing children, The sledge would somehow phase through solid matter, walls, roofs, closed doors, without causing any structural damage. Selective molecular manipulation, Valerian calculated. The entity is altering the quantum state of matter to allow passage while maintaining structural integrity. Such precision requires computational power exceeding our most advanced systems. Zephyr watched the readings with growing awe and terror. How long does he spend at each location? Approximately 0.003 seconds per dwelling, Nethros reported. He's visiting millions of homes per hour. Time dilation, Vex breathed. He's creating localized temporal distortions to extend his subjective time at each location. But the energy requirements are being supplied by the children themselves, Zephyr realized. Look at these brainwave patterns from the Pacific region. The holographic display showed electromagnetic signatures from millions of sleeping children, all resonating at the same frequency, all contributing to a massive collective field that seemed to power the impossible journey taking place above them. The humans have achieved something we never imagined possible, Stellaris said. They've created a symbiotic relationship between consciousness and dimensional physics. As the night progressed, and Santa's sleigh continued its impossible journey westward, the research team documented phenomenon after phenomenon that challenged their understanding of reality. The reindeer were somehow using quantum tunneling to achieve flight, creating localized gravity wells that allowed them to move through three-dimensional space as if it were two-dimensional. The sleigh itself was a masterpiece of dimensional engineering disguised as primitive technology. It existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, allowing it to carry what appeared to be an infinite cargo capacity within a 4-meter frame. I'm detecting gift materialization events, Valerian announced. The entity is creating matter from pure energy, customizing each object to precise specifications determined by reading the neural patterns of sleeping children. Custom matter creation, Vex marveled. We've barely achieved basic matter synthesis in laboratory conditions, and he's doing it millions of times per hour while traveling at relativistic speeds. Dr. Kalthari found herself facing a crisis of scientific understanding. Every measurement they took, every reading their instruments provided, indicated that they were witnessing technology so advanced it appeared to be magic. But it wasn't technology in any sense they understood. It was something entirely different. He's approaching the Americas, Morphia reported. Energy signatures are intensifying again. As Santa's sleigh crossed over the international dateline, the power readings spiked to levels that should have been detectable from neighboring star systems. Children across North and South America were beginning to dream, adding their unconscious faith to the massive field of belief that fueled the impossible journey. We need to contact the Galactic Research Council, Zephyr said finally. These findings will revolutionize our understanding of advanced physics. With what evidence? Vex asked. If we report that a primitive species has achieved dimensional manipulation through collective belief in flying reindeer, they'll recall us for psychological evaluation. It was a valid concern. The evidence was undeniable, but it challenged so many fundamental assumptions about how the universe operated that most civilizations would reject it outright rather than accept such a paradigm shift. Perhaps that's exactly the problem, Nethros suggested. We've become so focused on technological advancement that we've forgotten about other forms of evolution. Zephyr considered this as she watched Santa's sleigh phase through an apartment building in Hong Kong. You're suggesting consciousness itself can evolve? That sufficiently advanced awareness could manipulate reality directly? The humans call it magic, Stellaris observed. But perhaps magic is simply consciousness that has evolved beyond the need for intermediate technology. As Christmas Eve continued its march around the globe, the research team documented increasingly impossible feats. Santa somehow knew the exact wishes of every child on the planet, creating gifts that existed in no manufacturing database, many of which incorporated technology beyond galactic standards. A toy robot gifted to a child in Mumbai demonstrated artificial intelligence that surpassed the ship's own computer systems. A chemistry set delivered to a young scientist in Cairo contained elements that didn't appear in any periodic table. A musical instrument left for a girl in Stockholm produced harmonics in dimensions their sensors couldn't even detect. He's not just manipulating matter and energy, Valerian concluded. He's creating new forms of both, designed specifically to inspire and educate. Teaching tools, Zephyr realized. Every gift is designed to help these children develop their own potential. He's not just delivering presents. He's nurturing the next generation of human consciousness. The revelation was staggering. This wasn't simply an individual with impossible abilities performing an elaborate annual ritual. This was a systematic program to guide human development, to help their species evolve towards something greater than their current limitations. Which means, Vex said slowly, that the humans aren't primitive at all. They're in the middle of a consciousness evolution that we don't understand. As Santa's sleigh crossed into European airspace, the aliens aboard the Analytical Pride found themselves confronting a universe far stranger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined. The species they had dismissed as backward was apparently being guided by something that operated beyond the physical laws that govern galactic civilization. And Christmas Eve was only half over. Prepare for full spectrum analysis as he approaches the Atlantic region, Zephyr ordered. Whatever we're witnessing here, we're going to document every detail. None of the researchers noticed the subtle smile that appeared on their holographic displays for just a moment, or the way their coffee suddenly tasted faintly of hot chocolate and cinnamon. They were too busy trying to understand how flying reindeer were possible. But Santa Claus was well aware of his audience, and he was just getting started as Santa's sleigh crossed into European airspace. Dr. Zephyr Kalthari realized that their instruments were beginning to malfunction, or rather, they were detecting phenomena so far beyond their design parameters that the readings seemed impossible. The reindeer are accelerating, Dr. Morphia Stellaris reported, her gaseous form rippling with excitement within her containment suit. Current velocity is now 0.3 light speed, with no corresponding increase in energy expenditure. Dr. Vex Thornwall stared at the readings in bewilderment. That violates thermodynamics. They're actually becoming more efficient as they move faster, not less. Dr. Quill Nethros, monitoring the electromagnetic signatures from Earth's surface, looked up from his displays with an expression of wonder. The children's neural activity is synchronizing across continental boundaries. Millions of young humans are entering a collective dream state centered on Santa's arrival. The implications sent a chill through the research laboratory. Collective consciousness was theoretical even among the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The mathematical models existed, but no species had ever achieved practical implementation on a planetary scale. How is this possible? Zephyr asked, though she suspected the answer would challenge everything she thought she knew about consciousness and reality. Perhaps, suggested Dr. Keth Valerian, his cybernetic processes running thousands of calculations per second, human consciousness operates on principles we have not yet discovered. Our analysis assumes that awareness is localized to individual neural networks, but these readings suggest otherwise. On the holographic display, Santa's sleigh was visible as a bright point of impossible energy moving across the European continent. At each stop, the sensors detected brief spikes in dimensional activity that indicated the manipulation of space-time on a scale that should have required the power output of a small star. I'm reading temporal distortions at each delivery point, Dr. Linnea Vorthak announced, her tentacles working across multiple control interfaces simultaneously. The entity is creating localized time fields that allow him to spend subjective hours at each location while objective time remains constant. Zephyr pulled up detailed sensor logs from Santa's previous stops. The data showed that at each household, time itself seemed to slow down in a perfect sphere approximately 10 meters in diameter. Within these temporal bubbles, Santa could carefully place gifts, consume offered refreshments, and even repair broken toys, all while less than a second passed in the outside world. The precision required for such temporal manipulation Vex's voice trailed off as he ran calculations on his personal computer. The quantum field adjustment alone would require computational power that exceeds our ship's entire processing capacity by several orders of magnitude. And he's doing it millions of times per night, Stellaris added, creating perfect temporal fields with no apparent effort or conscious calculation. Dr. Nethros, who had been monitoring human communication networks, looked up with an expression of amazement. I've detected something unprecedented. Adults who encounter evidence of Santa's visits, partially eaten cookies, empty milk glasses, presents that weren't there the night before, are experiencing temporary neural pattern shifts. What kind of shifts? Zephyr asked. Brief returns to childhood brainwave patterns, Nethros explained. For a few minutes after discovering Santa's visit, adult humans regain the neural flexibility they possessed as children. Their minds become more receptive to possibilities they had previously dismissed as impossible. The research team fell silent as they processed this revelation. Santa Claus wasn't just delivering gifts to children. He was somehow preserving and nurturing the capacity for wonder in the adult human population. A preservation protocol, Valerian concluded. He's maintaining the collective human ability to believe in possibilities beyond their current understanding, which explains how this is sustainable, Zephyr realized. Each generation of children grows up maintaining some capacity for extraordinary belief, ensuring the continuity of the phenomenon. As the night progressed and Santa's sleigh continued its westward journey, the aliens documented increasingly sophisticated displays of impossible physics. In London, Santa somehow expanded a small apartment to accommodate a life-size playhouse without altering its external dimensions. In Paris, he created a chocolate fountain that apparently drew its supply from another dimension entirely. In Rome, he left behind a music box that played melodies and mathematical harmonics that didn't exist in standard physics. Each gift demonstrates a different aspect of advanced dimensional manipulation, Stellaris observed. It's as if he's conducting a masterclass in applied consciousness physics. Dr. Vorthak, monitoring atmospheric conditions around Santa's sleigh, made another startling discovery. The reindeer aren't just flying. They're creating stable atmospheric corridors that eliminate air resistance. They're essentially moving through vacuum tunnels that they generate and collapse in real time. Selective atmospheric manipulation, Vex marveled. They're removing specific molecules from their flight path while leaving the surrounding atmosphere intact. The computational requirements for such precision exceed anything in our technological databases, Valerian finished. This entity possesses capabilities that surpass the combined knowledge of galactic civilization. Zephyr found herself facing a profound crisis of scientific understanding. Every measurement they took suggested that they were observing technology so advanced it might as well be magic. But calling it technology seemed inadequate. What they were witnessing operated on principles that transcended the relationship between consciousness and reality as understood by every species in the galaxy. We need to consider the possibility, she said slowly, that we're not observing advanced technology at all. We're observing something entirely different, consciousness that has evolved to directly interface with fundamental forces. Evolve how? Nethros asked. Perhaps through the same mechanism we're documenting, Stellaris suggested. Collective belief sustained over generations, gradually developing the ability to alter reality through focused intention. As Santa's sleigh approached the Atlantic Ocean, preparing to cross into the Americas, the research team detected something that made their previous observations seem simple by comparison. The electromagnetic field generated by millions of dreaming children was beginning to resonate with something else, something vast and ancient that existed in dimensions their sensors could barely detect. I'm reading massive dimensional signatures from Earth's core, Morphia announced. Something is responding to the children's collective consciousness. The holographic display showed energy patterns emanating from deep within the planet, rising through geological layers and connecting with the field of belief generated by sleeping children. The connection created a feedback loop, that amplified both signals exponentially. The planet itself is participating, Zephyr breathed. Earth is somehow conscious and actively supporting this phenomenon. Or, Vex suggested, his skepticism finally, completely overwhelmed by the evidence. Something within the planet has been waiting for humanity to develop sufficient collective consciousness to make contact. The implications were staggering. If Earth itself was somehow aware and had been nurturing human development toward this moment of connection, then everything they understood about planetary formation and consciousness evolution needed to be reconsidered. Look at these historical readings, Nethros said, pulling up data from their long-term monitoring of Earth. The Christmas phenomenon has been gradually intensifying over centuries. Each generation of children creates a stronger field than the previous one. Exponential development, Valerian calculated. At current rates of intensification, human collective consciousness will achieve direct reality manipulation within 3 to 5 generations. And then what? Stellaris asked. The question hung in the air as Santa's sleigh crossed the Atlantic, its impossible velocity leaving a brief trail of dimensional disturbance that registered on sensors throughout the solar system. The research team realized they weren't just observing a holiday tradition. They were witnessing the emergence of a new form of conscious life that operated beyond the physical laws that governed the rest of the galaxy. We need to warn the Galactic Council, Vex said finally. Humanity is evolving into something unprecedented. Within a century, they could possess capabilities that dwarf our most advanced civilizations. Warn them of what? Zephyr asked. So far, everything we've observed suggests that this Santa entity is entirely benevolent. He's nurturing human development, not threatening anyone. But what happens when humanity develops these abilities independently? Vorthak pointed out, when children grow up believing they can manipulate reality directly, it was a valid concern. Throughout galactic history, species that achieved dimensional manipulation had required strict technological controls and mathematical precision to prevent catastrophic accidents. The idea of an entire civilization developing such abilities through belief and intention rather than scientific understanding was both fascinating and terrifying. Perhaps, Nethros suggested, that's exactly why this entity exists, to guide human development safely toward these capabilities. As Santa's sleigh entered North American airspace, the energy readings reached levels that threatened to overload their sensor arrays. Millions of children across the continent were adding their dreams and hopes to the collective field, creating a resonance pattern that seemed to strengthen Santa's abilities even further. He's not drawing power from their belief, Stellaris realized suddenly. He's teaching them to create power through their belief. Every Christmas, human children learn a little more about how consciousness can shape reality. A gradual education program, Valerian concluded, spanning generations and designed to prevent the chaos that could result from sudden development of reality manipulation abilities. The research team watched in awe as Santa's sleigh began its descent toward the first houses on the North American East Coast. The entity they had initially dismissed as primitive mythology was revealing himself to be perhaps the most sophisticated teacher in galactic history, conducting a masterclass in consciousness evolution that spanned centuries. And they were only beginning to understand the true scope of what they were witnessing. Increase sensor resolution to maximum, Zephyr ordered. We're going to document every detail of what happens next. Because as Santa Claus began his deliveries across the most technologically advanced nation on Earth, the aliens aboard the Analytical Pride suspected they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of consciousness, reality, and the relationship between belief and physical law forever. The primitive species they had come to study was about to teach them lessons that would revolutionize galactic civilization. As Santa's sleigh descended toward North America, Dr. Zephyr Calthari watched their instruments register energy signatures that defied every principle of physics she had learned in her 3 centuries of scientific training. The electromagnetic field generated by millions of sleeping American children was creating what could only be described as a consciousness matrix, a network of interconnected awareness that spanned an entire continent. The quantum coherence patterns are unlike anything in our databases, Dr. Morpheus Stellaris announced, her gaseous form swirling with agitation within her containment suit. The children's minds are synchronizing across vast distances, creating a collective processing system more sophisticated than our ship's primary computers. Dr. Vex Thornwall, who had spent the entire night oscillating between skepticism and amazement, stared at the readings with the expression of someone whose worldview was being systematically dismantled. They're essentially becoming a biological quantum computer during sleep. How is this possible? Perhaps, suggested Dr. Keth Valerian, his cybernetic consciousness running millions of calculations per second. Human neural architecture possesses capabilities that our understanding of neurology has not yet identified. These readings suggest their brains can operate in quantum superposition states during specific types of sleep. The holographic display showed Santa's sleigh moving from house to house across the eastern seaboard of North America. At each stop, their sensors detected brief moments where the fundamental structure of reality seemed to become flexible, allowing impossible things to happen with casual ease. In Boston, Santa somehow fit a full-size bicycle through a chimney that was barely half a meter wide. In New York, he left gifts in apartments 40 stories above ground level without using elevators or stairs. In Philadelphia, he consumed cookies and milk that somehow replenished themselves as he ate, creating matter from nothing in direct violation of conservation laws. The temporal distortions are becoming more pronounced, Dr. Quill Nethros reported. At each delivery point, I'm detecting localized time dilation events lasting subjective hours while occupying only milliseconds of objective time. Dr. Linnea Vorthack, monitoring dimensional stress patterns with her tentacles dancing across multiple control interfaces, looked up with an expression of wonder. He's not just manipulating time and space, he's creating pocket universes, tiny dimensional bubbles where different physical laws apply. Zephyr pulled up detailed analysis of these temporal anomalies. The data showed that within each pocket universe Santa created, the laws of physics became suggestions rather than absolute rules. Gravity could be ignored, matter could be created or transformed at will, and time moved according to need rather than entropy. The precision required to create stable pocket realities. Vex's voice trailed off as he attempted calculations that quickly exceeded his computer's processing capacity. He's essentially becoming a localized deity at each delivery point, and the children's collective consciousness is providing the computational foundation, Valerian concluded. Their dreams are processing the quantum calculations necessary to make these pocket universes stable and functional. Dr. Stellaris, who had been analyzing the atmospheric effects of Santa's passage, made another startling discovery. The reindeer aren't just defying gravity, they're redefining it. Within a 50-meter radius of their flight path, gravitational fields are being selectively modified to create optimal conditions for their movement. Localized physics modification, Nethros marveled. They're essentially carrying their own reality bubble that overrides local physical laws. As Santa's sleigh moved westward across the continent, the research team documented increasingly impossible feats. In Chicago, Santa somehow entered a skyscraper through its foundational basement, while simultaneously appearing on rooftops throughout the building. In Denver, he left behind toys that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, visible to children but undetectable to adult observation. Selective reality manifestation, Zephyr observed. The gifts exist within the consciousness frequency of childhood wonder, but phase out of reality when observed by adult awareness patterns. A teaching mechanism, Stellaris realized. He's demonstrating to children that reality responds to the quality of consciousness that observes it. Dr. Vorthack, monitoring global communication networks, reported another unprecedented phenomenon. I'm detecting spontaneous technological innovations occurring in households Santa has visited. Adults who discover evidence of his presence are experiencing brief periods of enhanced cognitive function. Enhanced how? Zephyr asked. Temporary access to problem-solving capabilities beyond normal human parameters, Vorthak explained. Engineers suddenly understanding solutions to problems they've worked on for years, doctors developing insights into complex medical conditions, artists conceiving works of unprecedented creativity. The implications were staggering. Santa wasn't just maintaining human capacity for wonder. He was actively accelerating human intellectual and creative development through exposure to impossible phenomena. An acceleration protocol, Valerian concluded. Each Christmas, human consciousness advances incrementally toward capabilities that match what they're witnessing. As Santa's sleigh crossed into the central time zone, the aliens detected something that challenged their understanding even further. The reindeer began to emit harmonics that resonated with fundamental quantum frequencies, creating music that existed partially outside normal space-time. Those harmonics, Stellaris's form rippled with excitement. They're creating standing waves in the quantum vacuum. The music is literally restructuring reality at the subatomic level. Christmas carols, Nethros said with amazement. The humans have been unknowingly practicing reality modification frequencies for centuries through their holiday music. The holographic display showed how sound waves from Santa's sleigh were being picked up by radio telescopes and satellite arrays across North America. But, more significantly, children who heard even faint echoes of these harmonics in their dreams were experiencing neural pattern changes that enhanced their natural creativity and problem-solving abilities. Each generation that experiences this grows up with slightly enhanced cognitive capabilities, Zephyr realized. He's gradually evolving human consciousness towards something greater. Dr. Vex, finally, accepting that everything he thought he knew about physics was inadequate, asked the question that had been troubling all of them. What is he? This Santa Claus entity. What kind of being possesses capabilities that surpass our entire civilization? Perhaps, Nethro suggested, he's what humanity is destined to become. An example of consciousness that has evolved beyond the need for technology, able to manipulate reality through pure intention and will. But if that's true, Vorthak pointed out, then humanity is evolving toward capabilities that could destabilize galactic civilization. What happens when an entire species can reshape reality through belief? It was a sobering thought. Throughout the galaxy, advanced civilizations maintain stability through shared understanding of physical laws and technological limitations. The emergence of a species that could ignore such constraints through consciousness alone would fundamentally alter the balance of power among galactic civilizations. Unless, Stellaris suggested, Santa's real purpose is to ensure that humanity develops these abilities with appropriate wisdom and restraint. As the sleigh crossed into the Mountain Time Zone, the research team detected another unprecedented phenomenon. Santa began leaving behind gifts that contained technology beyond anything in their galactic databases, not mechanical devices, but objects that interfaced directly with consciousness. A music box left for a child in Colorado generated melodies that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. A kaleidoscope delivered to a young girl in Utah showed patterns that revealed the mathematical structure underlying quantum mechanics. A simple wooden toy train given to a boy in Arizona demonstrated propulsion systems based on consciousness-directed momentum. Educational tools, Valerian observed. Each gift is designed to introduce children to concepts that will prepare them for advanced consciousness manipulation. He's building a curriculum, Zephyr realized. A centuries-long educational program designed to guide human development safely toward transcendence. Dr. Morphia, monitoring the quantum field fluctuations generated by millions of dreaming children, detected something that made their previous observations seem insignificant. The children's collective consciousness is beginning to interface with something vast, something that exists beyond our dimensional detection capabilities. The holographic display showed energy patterns emanating from regions of space that their sensors couldn't fully map. It was as if the universe itself was responding to the collective human capacity for wonder, awakening systems that had remained dormant for eons. Contact protocol, Nethros breathed. This entire phenomenon is preparing humanity for contact with forms of consciousness we haven't even imagined. As Santa's sleigh approached the Pacific time zone, preparing for the final phase of his impossible journey, the aliens aboard the Analytical Pride found themselves confronting a universe far stranger and more wonderful than they had ever conceived. "We need to reconsider everything," Zephyr said quietly. "Our understanding of consciousness, reality, the relationship between belief and physical law, the purpose of evolution itself. All of it needs to be reconsidered in light of what we're witnessing. The humans aren't primitive," Vex admitted finally. "They're the most advanced species we've ever encountered. They're just operating on principles we don't understand." As Santa's sleigh began its descent toward California, carrying impossible gifts to sleeping children who would wake up to a world slightly more magical than it had been the night before, the research team prepared to document the final phase of the most extraordinary demonstration of advanced consciousness they had ever witnessed. And, in the back of their minds, a troubling thought was beginning to emerge. If humanity was being prepared for such transcendence, what cosmic challenge required beings with reality manipulation abilities to face it? The universe, it seemed, was preparing Earth for something that even Santa Claus knew would require the combined power of an entire species that believed in impossible things.